Hi guys, I just want to make a quick video today, or I'll try and keep it as quick as possible, about training gear. Now this video is specifically for my students at Close Combat Martial Arts, but it applies to anyone who is trying to get into an MMA type club or a syllabus that follows that sort of training, pad work, sparring, grappling, those sorts of things. So I'm going to look at each different thing, starting with the boring stuff, and then we will look at the more exciting stuff after that. But I think the boring stuff is more important in some respects, as most clubs will provide beginner training gear, boxing gloves, etc. But the PPE type stuff is very important that students get that themselves. Clubs can't really provide that for hygiene reasons. So I'm going to run through the list of training gear, starting with mouth guards. Then groin guards are very important as well. Joint supports are very important if you've got dodgy joints. Hand wraps. Then we're going to look at boxing gloves, MMA grappling gloves, shin guards, your own focus pads, and a Ghee. And the last but not least is your MMA competition gloves. Now, I've put it in that order specifically because that's the order that I like students to get things. I'd prefer it if my students bought everything all in one go, because then they would be ready for anything that I want to put them into. But obviously it costs money. Students have to build up their training gear over time usually. And I mean, I provide a lot of training gear, especially boxing gloves and the air pads I provide for students to use initially, but I do like them to get their own gear eventually. So let's go through this list and break down each one and discuss it in a bit more detail. So mouth guards. Now mouth guards are probably the most important thing I find for protection, because your teeth are the most likely thing in my experience to take a knock. Even in light sparring, you can take little taps to your head and your body, and it doesn't really affect you that much because you've got soft tissue that bounces. Your teeth are very firm, and if they clap together, or you bite your lip or your cheek, or you take a knock to your face where your lip or your cheek will bash against your teeth, or your teeth clap together or grind side to side, it can cause a lot of pain, it can cause a lot of damage, but it can also cost a hell of a lot of money to repair teeth, replace teeth, and it's a much better option just to have that mouth protection straight away. Now, I'm going to be selling these on my website. You can buy them online really cheap. Most of the brand names are considerably more expensive, but I've tested loads of different mouth guards, and the ones that I'm going to be selling on my website are pretty much an exact replica of the more expensive ones that I like. They are a double layer gel mouth guard. So the internal layer is a gel molding which you heat up with water. I've made a video before actually on how to do a mouth guard, but it comes with its instructions anyway, and you just follow it step by step. But the inside layer will mold your teeth perfectly, and I normally find I have to do it twice to get it to stick to my top jaw, my top set teeth, so that it should feel like you have to pull it to get it off. It's got little openings along the front and big sort of pads at the back to protect your back teeth from smashing together, and a little pad at the front which usually sort of protects your front teeth, and it also protects your bottom row of teeth because it sort of hangs over the top. But yeah, those are the ones that I like. Those are the ones that are going to be for sale on my website for my students and anybody else who wants them, but they're there for my students mainly, and they're going to be as cheap as I can keep them. So yeah, that's the mouth guards. On to the next thing is groin protection. If you don't have groin protection, you can suffer quite nasty knocks. I mean, nobody ever deliberately aims for the groin, especially not when you're training in a group of friends, a teammate, and you're doing sparring or even grappling on the ground. But it does happen. I've taken knocks. I've actually accidentally, even as an instructor, I have accidentally kneed students or kicked students in the wrong place, completely by accident. Just put your leg up defensively, or you go to throw a straight kick and it doesn't quite get up to, you know, a push kick into the stomach or the solar plexus, and you end up just clipping someone, and it's absolute agony, and it stops the training for ages because you've got to recover, and it's not very nice. You've probably seen it on MMA if you watch MMA, or even in boxing with the low blows. They stop the fight. In MMA, they give them 5 minutes to recover, and it puts a big long hold on everything. Even with groin protection, it still can be quite painful. In terms of products, I haven't found a product that I will be selling on my website yet. I've tested various groin guards and I don't like many at all. The only one I like, which is the one I use, is the Diamond MMA Cup, and it comes with its own jock strap type thing, which is a specialized design, and you can actually buy a compression short version of the jock strap with the straps all tied into it. It's a really good product. It's got a lifetime guarantee, and it's the best groin guard I've ever used, but it is very expensive, so that's why I've not put anything on my website yet. I probably will sell them on my site, but I am looking for a cheaper alternative for my students. But when it comes to groin protection, you know, you want the best, really. So if you can afford to do it, I would definitely get a Diamond MMA Cup. If you can't, then we'll try and figure out a better option. Or there is a vast market available out there. We'll have to see how that goes. But yeah, I'll be doing a product review on my Diamond MMA Cup soon. But there are already Diamond MMA reviews out there, and when you watch the videos, you'll be shocked at how good they really are. And when you actually try it, you'll be quite hesitant, and you'll think, oh no, it's not going to be as good as they make it out. But it genuinely is. I've taken knocks in it, and it feels like I'm not even wearing one, but I've taken knocks and it doesn't even hurt because of the way the silicone rubber around the outside molds perfectly, and it's in the perfect shape so that it sort of bounces but doesn't dig in. That's the only way to describe it. But yeah, so that's groin protection. Everybody who does any form of combat sports will need groin protection, and that's the one that I would recommend. We will look at other options in the future, but that is it for now. So on to the next type of training gear is joint supports. Now this kind of ties in to hand wraps as well, because hand wraps are joint supports, but I've put them in a separate category after this because they are slightly different. But in terms of joint supports, I wear ankle sleeves, I wear knee supports, and I wear hand supports, wrist supports. If we are doing a lesson which involves taking on and off gloves and changing between different types of striking, if we're doing an MMA type lesson where we're doing grappling and takedowns included with pad work, then I will either not wear anything on my hands underneath my gloves, or I will, if my wrists are feeling weak, or if I feel like I need a bit more support, depending on what lesson we're doing, I will wear wrist supports, which are basically like hand wraps, but they don't give quite as much support and protection, but they do a similar thing. They lock the heat in, they give you a bit of compression. It's very similar to the ankle sleeves. They're the same material, and they've got a little thing in here. I'll show you a picture when I actually edit the video. But they're quite handy. I find them, I wear them more than I wear my boxing hand wraps because they're easier to get on and off, and I use them more for lessons where we're chopping and changing, like I said. Ankle supports, knee supports, and wrist supports. You can even get like neoprene shorts. Say if you've got a bad back, a lower back problem, or problems with your pelvis, which I've had issues with in the past, you can get neoprene supports that lock in more heat and are a bit tighter than the sort of hosiery type, if that's what you call it, those sorts of supports. I've also seen neoprene shoulder supports. You know, if you've like popped your shoulder out and you need some support, you can get a neoprene wrap that comes around and locks it all in place and keeps the heat in to keep your joints supple. Again, you can get neoprene anklets and knee supports, but it's up to you. It depends what level of support you think you need. And yeah, I would advise just wearing, especially the ankle supports and the knee supports, even if you feel like you don't really need them. It just locks a bit of heat in there and prevents your ankles from and your knees from overextending, and yeah, it just locks everything together. And yeah, it's a great idea, I think. On to the next thing is hand wraps, boxing hand wraps. Now, as I said, you can get the standard wrist supports, but you can't really beat boxing hand wraps because they, when you tighten your fist, it locks it all in together, and when you loosen it, it's still firm and supportive, but it sort of allows your hand to, you know, it doesn't cut off the circulation or anything. And I've actually made a video on how to wrap your hands, but I can show you in the class after lesson, not during lesson really, because it takes a while to learn it, but we can do like a little seminar type thing on that if any students want to learn how to do that. It's one of those things, once you learn how to do it, it's easy, but sort of figuring it out initially can be quite tricky. There are videos on it. I actually learned how to do it just from looking at a picture that I found on Google quite a long time ago now, but I've watched videos on it, but I didn't seem to pick it up off the videos as easily. But I learned on it just looking at a little picture that showed you each stage, and that did the job for me. But once you learn how to do it, it's quite easy to do. But I have made a video on that. If you want to watch it, check it out. But if not, yeah, just Google it, look at Google Images, and you'll see the pictures of how to do it, little diagrams. I've tried various different hand wraps. I'm going to sell the Blitz hand wraps on my website because I've tried RDX's ones. I've tried a couple of other different types, which I can't remember what brands they are. But the Blitz ones, surprisingly enough, are see, Blitz are a sort of a mid-range. They try to keep their products as cheap as possible to allow as many people as possible to use them. So they're not as elitist as, say, RDX or any of the bigger brands. RDX is sort of a mid-range, but they're stepping up their gear. They're starting to provide boxing gear to pro boxers and stuff like that now. So they are stepping up in class and in quality in terms of equipment, but they're considerably more expensive. And then you get the proper boxing gear from the well-established boxing brands, which really bump up their prices. But Blitz, their hand wraps are exactly what I was looking for. I've made a product review on those, which you can see as well, and I will be selling them on my website for any of my students that want them, or anybody else. So yeah, definitely worth having a pair of hand wraps if you've got time to wrap your hands before training, which, you know, we always allow a bit of time. If you want to wrap your hands, that's absolutely fine. Obviously, I'm not going to teach it during lesson though, so you need to learn how to do it beforehand, or I can teach you, but not during class, because it takes quite a long time and it will feed into our training time. So next thing, on to the more interesting stuff. Now, most students, the first thing they will want to buy is a decent pair of boxing gloves. Now, I have tried a lot of RDX boxing gloves. Some of them I like and some of them I don't. My first pair of boxing gloves were Lonsdale, and they were a cheap pair of Lonsdale gloves, and they weren't great at all. And then I went up to RDX, I bought a slightly more expensive pair, and they lasted me for about 3 years, and I really like them. I still got them now. I don't use them myself so much, but my students do, because they're a mid-range glove. They're not too expensive. Obviously they do have their more expensive types of gloves on there. Their pro range is up well above 100 quid, but I tend to buy, and I tend to promote gloves for new starters, and for my own children I've bought them £30 range sort of gloves, and they're good. You know, they're good quality leather. They're a bit heavy on the padding, but that's good for training. You know, it's good to have a bit of extra padding, because you don't want to be smashing people around and hurting people. So having that extra padding, and it protects your wrists as well when you're learning how to punch. So and they're very firm. They've got good wrist supports, good padding, proper decent leather. I do like RDX gloves. Aside from that though, I have been trying to find a supplier to make my own close combat martial arts club gloves, and I may have found someone. I've been through 3 different suppliers that have messed me around, and it's not looking great. But if I ever do, then obviously I will be selling my own gloves on the website. I won't be selling boxing gloves from other brands, primarily because they're so readily available on the internet. They're so easy to get, and unless I was to find a good trade deal with some company, I probably won't even bother, because they're already there, they're already available. So there's no need for me to do that. The only reason I'm selling things on my website is to make it easy for my students to access. If it grows into a separate business, then so be it. Fair enough. Not that I don't think I've even got time for that, but we'll see how it goes. Those boxing gloves are, yeah, they're all readily available on the internet. I've actually designed my own boxing gloves. Every pair of boxing gloves I've ever tried have always had little flaws that I don't like. So I've edited things and taken things from gloves that I've liked, and basically created my own glove. But we'll see how that goes. The next thing I like students to buy is MMA grappling gloves. Now there's 2 different types of MMA glove. There's the sort of competition gloves, where you've got the very small padding. I think they're 4-ounce gloves. They're very small, and they've just got a little bit padding on the top, and you can see the individual finger loops, finger holes, and they've got an open palm, and they don't usually have any thumb protection at all, so it's just that pad on the top. I'm not talking about those gloves. Those are for competition. If you hit someone with them, there's not much padding at all, and that's fine for competition. But when you're training and sparring and grappling, and when you're doing pad work that involves takedowns and level changes, I like to use what I call, or what other companies call as well, is a grappling glove. Some of them call them shooter gloves, but I call them grappling gloves. And basically they're an MMA glove with an open palm, a little bit of thumb support, a little pad on the thumb here with a loop here. They've got the same thing with the fingers, a similar sort of guard, but then they've got a big pad on the top. And that means that you can hit the pads, you can hit each other relatively hard without causing any damage that MMA competition gloves might cause. They're kind of like a cross between a competition glove, an MMA competition glove, and a boxing glove. And I'll show you some pictures of those anyway. I've made my own ones, and I'm looking for a supplier for them, because I can't find any gloves anywhere that give the same level of support as the ones that I have made myself, because they don't have the same finger loops, they don't have the same thumb support. There are some that are very similar to what I have created, but they're not the same quality. The finger loops are bad. They've still got the big pad on the top and the thumb support, some of them, but they don't have the finger loops that I like, which lock in the fingers together. A lot of them, they sort of split your fingers when you're trying to form a fist, and they pull your fingers out, and I don't like that. So it's all well and good wearing them when you're messing about doing light sparring, just tapping each other. But when you're smashing the pads and you're doing pad work that involves, say, like doing a 1-2 and shoot, and you're using your hands as well, when you're hitting those pads for prolonged sessions, it can cause quite nasty abrasions in between your fingers, and because it's not somewhere that you normally build up resistance. I mean, obviously, if you wear that sort of glove over time, you will build up, tough skin, but there's always that risk of it causing an abrasion, and then you can't train because you've got to let it heal. And that, those gloves are supposed to be there to protect your hands from that. So I just don't understand why some companies have made them like that, but that's just the way it is. I like them to offer that support and protection straight away, all the time, not causing any abrasions. So that's why I've tried to design my own gloves that meet that criteria. And if I ever find a decent supplier that can make them and won't mess me about, then they will be on my website too. But again, if you want to buy products from other companies, there are some available that aren't too expensive. Some I have tried, some I haven't, and we can discuss that if you want any recommendations, if you don't want to wait to see what happens with my own manufacturer. But the gloves that I get, if I get them made, they will be a reasonable price, competitive price, and they will be a lot better quality than what I've seen on the market Anyway, moving on. Number 7 on the list is Shin Guards. Now, these are very important everybody likes to smash their legs and try and build up a bit of resistance on your bones and on your skin, on your shins, on your feet as well. I mean, obviously you've got to be a lot more careful with your feet because you've got a lot of small bones in your feet. And it's good to build up a bit of resistance by kicking the bag, but when you're sort of doing sparring, it's good to test your legs without pads and build up a resistance and see how things can injure you. Get a little injuries, get a swollen foot every now and then, get a bruise on your leg. That's all well and good, and it's good to do that. But if you take a more serious injury, even if it's not that serious, even if you smash your foot on someone's elbow, it's going to take a while to heal. And if you want to train twice a week, 3 times a week, or even, you want to come to the next class the next week, it might not be able to heal. And if you've got work separate from that involves walking around or being physical in any way, it can cause a lot of problems. So I prefer my students, when we're doing sort of round kicks or learning how to block kicks with our legs, I would prefer that students wear Shin Guards 9 times out of 10. I mean, when students get to a more advanced level and they've built up a resistance, because kicking with Shin Guards does actually build up a bit of resistance in your legs and your muscles, and it gets used to that, because you can still hurt yourself even with Shin Guards on, but it allows you to learn your limits. It allows you to build up a resistance without taking any serious injuries most of the time. Obviously, if someone goes crazy, they're going to hurt themselves or someone else. But for the majority of the time, if you've got Shin Guards on, you will be able to train a lot more, because obviously you're protecting your skin and your bones and your muscles from taking any serious knocks that might put you out of training or might take longer to recover. So Shin Guards are very important. The next thing on my list, number 8, is focus pads. Now, I provide focus pads anyway for students. I have to clean them in between each use, especially at the moment during COVID restrictions. I like to clean them anyway, and I spray them down with antibacterial spray. But I do like students to think about getting their own pads. It's more hygienic. It's basically just for hygiene reasons, of course, and it means that I don't have to worry about replacing my gear as often. I don't have to think about who needs what. If I know people are turning up with pads, it just lifts the stress off my shoulders a little bit. But yeah, it's mostly for hygiene reasons. I don't really mind having pads for students, but It means I've got to do a little bit more work to clean them. It means that I've got to make sure they're safe and in good working order. And it means that obviously for students there's always a risk when you're sharing pads, and there's bacteria on the pads. Even though I do spray them down, you can't really get inside to clean them, because obviously they've got a cover over where the fingers are. So I spray inside, but there's always the risk that there'll be bacteria in there, and that's it's just better if students have their own. Now, number 9 on my list is a Ghee. Now, this seems like it's quite far down the list, but I prefer students to buy as much of this gear as possible, as soon as possible, so they've got it all available to themselves. Having a Ghee, because we teach, most of our grappling is non-Ghee stuff, so it's not really that big of a deal, but it is handy to have a Ghee, especially if you are you want to go a little bit harder and you want to practice things where t-shirts might accidentally get pulled and ripped. These t-shirts, they're good quality. This isn't one of my club t-shirts, obviously, but they're good quality and they're quite expensive, and they're wicking, and they're good for cardio, but they're not really made for being pulled about. No t-shirt is. So having a Ghee on, just in case someone grabs you and pulls, you don't want to rip a 15 quid t-shirt and have to replace it. So having a Ghee top on at least is all well and good. But obviously when we get higher up in the grades, we will start looking at Ghee type stuff, Ghee chokes, and using the Ghee to manipulate each other. But that's a long way off for most of my students. But yeah, and if you want to wear your belt, obviously I give out a belt for each grade as well, which is kind of ceremonial when we're wearing non-Ghee stuff most of the time. But if you want to, when you do wear a Ghee, when we get more advanced, having a belt, having your belt will sort of go along with that, and it will look good. In terms of Ghee designs, there are many Ghees on the market. They're all the best Ghees are obviously incredibly expensive, but they last for a very long time. They're really well made. I am looking at getting a close combat Ghee made. I've actually had one made, and it's pretty good quality. I'm very happy with it. There are a few issues with the design on it. The logos were a bit wonky, but but that manufacturer, we fell out, so I won't be using him. But I'm looking at other manufacturers, so we might eventually have a club Ghee, which will look very smart. But most people who do grappling, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Judo, Judo, they tend to wear sort of a standard Ghee, but in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, they tend to have their own sort of Ghee that sort of reflects them as a person. Some people are into sort of heavy metal, and I've seen some Ghees with sort of like heavy metal insides, big picture of like Metallica or something like that, cartoons and stuff. We will look at getting a Ghee done, but again, I can recommend companies that sell Ghee. So if you're interested and you want to get yourself a Ghee, have a chat with me and I will point you in the right direction. Now, the last thing on my list is number 10, MMA competition gloves. We discussed MMA grappling gloves or shooter gloves earlier, but MMA competition gloves. Now, the reason why I would recommend getting these eventually is because it's all well and good hitting the pads and shooting and, wearing grappling gloves that actually protect yourself and your training partner from taking any knocks that might cause scratches or injuries or whatever. But you need to get MMA competition gloves if you want to compete, because it's best to get used to hitting the pads or the bag with MMA competition gloves on, because it really gives you a feel for where you're protected. With a grappling glove, you've got a big pad here, so you can hit at slightly different angles that might, with MMA competition gloves, for example, if you hit here, you're going to scratch up your knuckles. You might even the parts of the competition gloves might even cause abrasions on your fingers. It's dangerous. So you'll see in MMA, they'll, especially like when they're on the ground, they start hitting like this or like this, and they create different angles to make sure that the pad and these knuckles are hitting rather than anywhere here. But if you're wearing boxing gloves, you'll see a lot of fighters hit like this, like when you're doing a long hook, you'll catch them with this part, but you can't do that with MMA gloves on because it will hurt your knuckles. It'll probably break your fingers if you hit them in the wrong part of the head on a big solid strong bone. You might break your fingers at the wrong angle. So it's best to work those different angles. So yeah, wearing MMA competition gloves is handy for learning how to fight in those gloves. So yeah, that's pretty much my list. Now, I just want to cover head guards. I personally don't like head guards. Now, with new students, they create a false sense of security. They're good at protecting you from taking scratches and surface wounds and bruises, and they protect your eyes a bit more. But I find, if you look at the difference between injuries in MMA and boxing injuries are far more dangerous because they're all head injuries and they cause concussions. And wearing a head guard causes new students, especially, to feel like they're more protected than they actually are. They're more protected from taking cuts and scrapes and getting small bruises and scratches on their face, and like I said, their eyes are more protected, but the actual impact on the head isn't that much reduced by wearing a head guard. So if you take a knock to the head because you're wearing a head guard and you think it won't hurt as much, it's still going to rattle your brain, and it's not healthy. Whereas if you don't have a head guard on, I find that students are more inclined to be more protective of their head instinctively. You're flinching and you're moving with your head, and once I get students to that stage where they start moving their head, slipping, bobbing and weaving, they're more inclined to do that when they don't have a head guard on. They're more inclined to keep their guard up when they don't have a head guard on. They're more inclined to protect their face because it's instinctive, and when you've got that head guard on, it creates a false sense of security. The other reason why I don't like them is because they make you incredibly hot. It's okay in the winter if you're in a well ventilated room, but in the summer it burns you out quicker. You're getting hot in the head, and I find that makes people not train as well as they can. It creates brain fog, your head overheats. It also creates, it doesn't let, you lose a lot of heat from your head. So I just don't like them. I think that, and I've looked at the research into head guards, and from what I can see, scientifically speaking, people are better off without them. So we don't tend to use them. We don't tend to train with them, and I'm sticking to it. I haven't had any major issues by doing that so far. So yeah, that's it. That's my video on training gear. If anybody's got any questions about anything I've said in this video, any of the products that you would like to try, please consult me first. For my students, I'm not about selling my own gear just to make a profit. Everything I'm going to sell on my website is going to be product tested and made to be exactly how I want it for my own use and for my students' safety. But if you would prefer to buy from any other company, that's absolutely fine. Just make sure you buy the right gear. And with RDX, for example, I've tried most of their products. I know what they're like, and I can give you advice. Most of their boxing gloves are good, but their grappling gloves, every one of their grappling gloves, I think they've all got flaws. The only ones I like are the Noir ones, but I'm not happy with them because they don't have the thumb protection. So yeah, please consult me before you buy anything, any of my students anyway. talk to me in class, after class, or you can message me on Facebook and we'll discuss it. I can point out some good things that you can look for in a glove, bad things that most new students don't seem to, but even myself, you know, you buy a pair of gloves thinking they look good, and then you notice there's flaws with them that are just that make them unsafe or unusable. And I would like to make sure that students pick up the best gear first time, so you're not wasting money and not having to send things back if you even can. You can't send mouth guards back for hygiene reasons. If you buy a decent mouth guard, and make sure it's the right one. And yeah, that's basically it. That's my video. So thanks for watching, and I will see you all soon.